Okay, so the bit that we missed in Deuteronomy 14, middle of 14 to the end of 14 is what we're going to cover. And it's all about the Ma'aseh. We've covered the Ma'aseh, the tithe, the tenth, kind of briefly before, but we're going to look at what Deuteronomy 14 says. It says, you do certainly tithe all the yield of your grain that the field brings forth year by year. You have eaten before Yahovah your Elohim in the place where he chooses to make his name tabernacle, the tithe of your grain, your new wine, your oil, the firstlings of your herds and your sheep, so that you learn to fear Yahovah your Elohim always. So these things were what was to be brought up, and they were to be eaten of before Yahovah, all of those things. Now in verse 22, if that was the only verse about giving a tenth, then people would be right in what they assume sometimes, that it's about grain. You shall tithe all of your grain, all of your food, everything that came from the field. That's what the tithe is about. It's not the only verse that we're given. It's well worth us spending time to look at this, because this is one of those things. There's like a handful of things, isn't there, that people will say, I'm obedient, I do the commands, and yet I'm lacking in one. Okay? This is something. And in fact, all of the minchas that we've looked at, all of them are things that people think, for some reason, that they've got kind of like a get out of jail free card with. Oh yeah, but that's my money, and I need my money, don't I? Okay, so tithe all the yield of your grain. When people just take this scripture out of context and they don't understand it in the rest of the context of scripture, you get memes like this. Okay, you'll see this if you use Facebook and you're in any Torah groups. Tithing was only food. And then, very ironically, it says at the bottom, read scriptures and don't take it out of context. Okay, so was tithing only food? Well, let's consider what it said. It said, tithe your grain. Okay, so that sentence in and of itself tells us that tithing is distinct from grain. Grain is something that you can tithe, but the verb to tithe is something that you do external to grain, or anything else that you might tithe out of. Tithing is something external to that. Okay, as I said, the word ma'aseh means tenth. Okay, so it's saying give a tenth of your grain, for example, in Deuteronomy 14. We know that giving a tenth is something which is external to grain, but it's not the only thing that it says about it anyway. Okay, Genesis 14 verse 20, this is Abraham. Hebrews tells us that in this event, Abraham gave a tithe to Melchizedek. And in fact, when it says he gave him a tenth of all, what it says is he gave him a ma'aseh of all. He gave him a tithe of all, is literally what it says anyway. But he didn't just give him a tenth of his grain, he gave him a tenth of everything that he had taken as spoil in that battle. Genesis 28:20 to 22. Yaakov made the vow saying, seeing Elohim is with me. Should be all right. Seeing Elohim is with me and has kept me in the way that I'm going, and has given me bread to eat and a garment to put on. When I have returned to my father's house in peace, and Yahovah has been my Elohim, then this stone which I have set as a standing column shall be Elohim's house. And of all my grain? No. Of all that you give me, I shall certainly give a tenth to you. And that word again is ma'aseh. I shall give a tithe to you. Deuteronomy 14:24 to 25 says, when the way is too long for you so that you're not able to bring the tithe. You imagine Yehovah gives you a harvest, and you've got a tenth of that harvest. You've got a tenth of whatever else. It might be quite a lot for you to take on a journey to Jerusalem. It might be too far for you to go. The place where Yehovah your Elohim chooses to put his name is too far from you. When Yehovah your Elohim is blessing you, then you shall give it in silver. Okay, so what they were to do is they would sell their tithe. They would have the silver, which was 10% of their increase, and then they would give that to Yehovah. And we'll look at this more closely in a second, but when it says turn it into silver and take it to the feast with you, people get that confused and think that it's a separate tithe. And you've got to tithe once to the Levites, and then you tithe again to for a festival tithe, and then you tithe again in the third year, and you end up with whatever percentage people think. But it's not. That silver, which constitutes what people call the festival tithe, is just your tithe that you've sold into silver. And we'll see why they're to sell it into silver and how that works when we get to it. But as we can see here, the tithe is not grain. They sold their increase into money, and then they gave the money. Our increase, whatever we have today, usually is going to be money. The increase that we receive is usually money. It might not be. Elohim might increase you in something else, and of course then a tithe of that would be due to Yehovah. Deuteronomy 14:28 says, at the end of every third year, you shall bring out all the tithe of your increase of that year and store it up within your gates. So it's not just tithe of your grain. What you tithe of is your increase, and your increase can take many forms, myriad forms. That's not what's important, the means by which you're increased. What's important is that you remember a tenth of it belongs to Yehovah, and it's not for you to use for a profane purpose. Deuteronomy 16 verse 15 says, for 7 days you shall observe a festival to Yehovah your Elohim in the place which Yehovah chooses, because Yehovah your Elohim does bless you in all your increase and in all the work of your hands. And that's what the tithe is of. In Luke 18:11-12, it says, the Pharisee stood and began to pray with himself in this way, Elohim, I thank you that I am not like the rest of men, swindlers, unrighteous, adulterers, or even as this tax collector. I fast twice a week. I give tithes of all my grain. That's not what he says. He says, I give tithes of all that I possess. So taking Deuteronomy 14 out of context and saying they were told to tithe of their grain, therefore we do not tithe because we don't have grain, is taking the scriptures out of context. This is the context which tithing exists in. Matthew 23:23-24, Yeshua says, woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, because you tithe the mint and the anise and the cumin. Okay, these were things which in those days were incredibly valuable. Salt, spices, they were things of very high value. They weren't just tithing of their grain. Yeshua says, look, you're tithing of these things, yet you've neglected the weightier matters of the Torah, the right ruling or the judgment, the compassion, and the belief or faith. These need to have been done. So tithing needs to have been done without neglecting the others. Okay, so don't neglect the weightier matters of the law. And it's interesting how he characterizes this. He says, blind guides straining out a gnat and yet swallowing a camel. Okay, so in this, okay, if as you're listening to this, you give tithes, don't think, I'm all right, I've done this, I've passed this test, and yet there will be something else in your life in which you've decided, this is the thing which I won't do. It's any of these things. And look what Yeshua says are the weightier matters, the things that you should particularly concentrate on. Okay? Judgment, compassion, and belief or faith. Okay? So if you give a tithe, don't think, oh no, I give a tithe. This is not for me. This is for all of us. This addresses our attitudes to all of these things. When the way is too long for you, so that you are not able to bring the tithe, or when the place where Yehovah your Elohim chooses to put his name is too far from you, when Yehovah your Elohim is blessing you, then you shall give it in silver. Give what? Your tithe. Not an extra tithe. This is your tithe. You shall give your tithe in silver. And have taken the silver in your hand and gone to the place which Yehovah your Elohim chooses. Okay, you can't carry all of the stuff that is a tenth. So you sell it into silver, you go to Jerusalem. When you get there, though, you've given the silver for anything your soul desires, for cattle, sheep, wine, strong drink, for anything your soul desires. And you have eaten there before Yehovah your Elohim, and you have rejoiced, you and your household. So what's it talking about? It's saying you ought to eat of your tithe before Yehovah. When you go to the festival, if you've sold it into silver, buy back something so that you can eat of that thing. Okay? Whatever your soul desires within that context, obviously. Do not forsake the Levite who is within your gates, for he has no part nor inheritance with you. Again, you're going to hear this over and over again in the Torah. At the end of 3 years, you bring out all the tithe of your increase of that year, store it up within your gates. And the Levite, because he has no portion nor inheritance with you, the sojourner, the fatherless, the widow who are within your gates, shall come and eat and be satisfied, so that Yehovah your Elohim does bless you in all the work of your hand which you do. So as we read before, when you go to these festivals, it should be that the Levite, the widow, the fatherless, and the sojourner are all there and all eat before Yehovah. In the third year, you take of your tithe within your gates, and you allow these people to come and to eat and to be satisfied. And then it wouldn't just be the Levite who's taking of these things home to subsist on. It would be these categories of people as well. Now, people call this the poor tithe. Okay? They say that this is the tithe that you give to the poor. It's not true. This is the tithe that you give to the sojourner, to the fatherless, and to the widow. The poor are not mentioned. The poor were dealt with in Deuteronomy 15. That is a mincha, extra to the tithe. You don't wait till the third year to provide for the poor. You always provide for the poor. In the third year, you give so that these people can come and eat before Yehovah with the rest of the people. So, the tithe in visual terms. You've got everything that you're increased by, and you take a tithe of that, or a tenth of that, 10% of that. A normal year for an inhabitant of Jerusalem, someone who doesn't have to travel too far with their tithe, you've got your total increase, and you've got 10% of that. You take the tithe to the temple during the feast to give for the Levites. Then you eat of the things you offered as part of offering them and rejoice before Yehovah. Okay? So you take your goods, if it's not too far for you to go, you take them to the temple, you give them to the Levite, and then you share in those things. The festival tithe, as people call it, what that actually is for somebody who lives far from Jerusalem, somebody who sells their tithe into silver. Okay, so they've got their total increase and their tithe. You sell the things Yehovah has increased you with so that you can travel more easily. And then you give the tithe in silver, but buy back things to eat so as to rejoice before Yehovah using some of it. So that's the way that it works. Okay? And the third year, you got your 10%. You store that up within your gates. You use the tithe to allow the Levite, the widow, the fatherless, and the stranger to come and eat before Yehovah. Not the poor. You don't give the tithe to the poor. The poor is a separate responsibility that we have before Yehovah. A lot of people kind of fall into the trap of saying, oh, what I do is I spend my tithe on the poor people. And that's kind of like the third year tithe. And it's not true. You can't spend your tithe on the poor, because your giving to the poor is separate to the matter of the tithe. So Deuteronomy 12:17 says, you are not allowed to eat within your gates the tithe of your grain, or of your new wine, or of your oil, the firstlings of your herd or your flock, or of any of the offerings which you vow, or any of the voluntary offerings, or of the heave offering of your hand. But eat them before Yehovah your Elohim. That's what it is. You eat before him and you rejoice before him. If you've sold your tithe, you take of that and you get something to eat and rejoice before him at the feast. You, your son, your daughter, your male servant, your female servant, the Levite who is within your gates, and you have rejoiced before Yehovah your Elohim in all that you put your hands to. Again, guard yourself that you do not forsake the Levite as long as you live in your land. And we'll see that that's one of the things that Israel did. They neglected the Levites, and then they fell into a state of spiritual corruption. Leviticus 27 verse 30 says, all the tithe of the land, of the seed of the land, or the fruit of the tree, belongs to Yehovah. It is set apart to Yehovah. Does it say belongs to the Levite? It is set apart to the Levite? Doesn't, of course. The tithe is not due to a Levite. It doesn't matter who you give the tithe to. You don't owe it to any man. You owe it to Yehovah. Your duty is to give it to Yehovah. Okay? He says, give it to the Levites. He says, and see, I have given the children of Levi all tithes in Israel. So they're mine, but this is what I've done with it. I've given it to the Levites as an inheritance in return for the service which they are serving, the service of the tent of meeting. But the tithe of the children of Israel, which they present as a contribution to Yehovah, I've given to the Levites as an inheritance. So the Levites didn't have another means of income. They didn't have an inheritance. They didn't have land to farm, for example. That is why I have said to them, among the children of Israel, they have no inheritance. So the situation that we're in, just like with everything that is to be given to a priest, we have to discern from the scriptures who is the person that qualifies as the Levite. Okay, we know who qualifies as our high priest and his sons. Who is the one who qualifies as the Levite? 2 Chronicles 35, 1-3. Yoshiyahu performed the Passover to Yehovah in Jerusalem. They sacrificed the Passover on the 14th day of the first month. And he set the priests in their duties, strengthened them for the service of the house of Yehovah, and said to the Levites who were teaching all Israel. So this is who the Levites are. Amongst Israel, Yehovah said, I've scattered the Levites. Every town where you dwell, that's what the Levites who are in your midst are, you're going to have a Levite who is to teach the rest of you the Torah. Deuteronomy 17, 8-9, it'll actually be, when the matter arises which is too hard for you to judge, between blood and blood, between plea and plea, or between stroke and stroke, matters of strife within your gates, then you shall rise and go to the place which Yehovah your Elohim chooses, and shall come to the priests, the Levites, and to the judge who is in those days, and shall inquire, and they shall declare to you the word of judgment. This was one of the roles of the Levites, the ones who were declaring the word to the people, would teach the word, and as we will see, explain the word to the people. Nehemiah 8, 6-9 says, and Ezra blessed Yehovah, the great Elohim. Then all the people answered, Amen, Amen, while lifting up their hands, and they bowed their heads and worshipped Yehovah with faces to the ground. And Yeshua and Bani and Sherev Yamin, Akub, Shabbatai, Hodiah, Maaseiah, Kalita, some Levites. The Levites caused the people to understand the Torah while the people were in their place. And they read in the book of the Torah of Elohim, explaining its meaning, and caused them to understand the reading. So this is what the Levites are. This is who we're looking for today. And it's funny, me teaching you these things and explaining all these things to you because I qualify as somebody that a tithe can be given to. But to me, it's just like everyone gets some kind of test. Often you will find with teachers, they will be afraid of the tithe subject. They won't mention it because they know that they are beneficiaries of the tithe. To me, it would be easier for me to just go, oh yeah, we'll read that bit, but we won't really explain it. But this is key. This is very important to Yehovah. It's part of the mincha. And if this is the thing that people get stuck on and they won't do, then this is the thing which will see them excluded from the kingdom of Elohim. Okay, it's my responsibility, it's my job to teach that people should give their tithe to me. Weirdly. Verse 9 says, Nehemiah, who was the governor, and Ezra the priest, the scribe, and the Levites who taught the people. So the Levites cause people to understand the Torah. They explain its meaning. They teach the people. 2 Chronicles 30 verse 22, and Chizkiyahu spoke to the heart of all the Levites that taught good understanding concerning Yehovah. It's not hard for us to see who it is that Yehovah would have us give this money for. What did he want this money, which is his, used for? And with them he sent Levites. Hello, the people again. They taught in Yehudah, and with them was the book of the Torah of Yehovah. And they went around into all the cities of Yehudah and taught the people. So the tithe is not owed to the Levite, it's owed to Yehovah. But Yehovah tells us what it is that we're to do, who it is that he wants that given to. 2 Kings 17, 27 to 28 says, and the king of Ashur commanded, saying, send one of the priests whom you exiled from there to go there. Let him go and dwell there, and let him teach the judgment of the Elohim of the land. And one of the priests who they'd exiled from Shomeron came and dwelt in Bethel and taught them how to fear Yehovah. So this is when a load of people who weren't Israel came to dwell in the land, and loads of bad stuff started happening to them. They were told, send one of the priests. They're going to teach the Torah of Elohim so that they can learn to fear him and so that all of these bad things can stop happening. Deuteronomy 33, 8 to 10, of Levi, he said, your Tumim and your Urim belong to your kind one, whom you tried at Massah, with whom you contended at the waters of Meribah, who said of his father and mother, I have not seen them, and he did not acknowledge his brothers or know his own children, for they have guarded your word and watched over your covenant. They teach your judgments to Jacob and your Torah to Israel. So again, all the way through, it's not difficult for us to understand exactly who are the Levites today. It's the people who have been scattered amongst Israel. Okay, we've been dispersed to the four corners of the earth. Among us now, imagine in Israel, they had the Levites scattered around everywhere. Now amongst the world, we've got the Levites scattered around everywhere. So when we understand this, I've given the children of Levi all tithes in Yisrael as an inheritance in return for the service which they're serving, the service of the tent of meeting. Okay? We corporately are the tent of meeting. The tithes of the children of Israel, which they present as a contribution to Yehovah, I have given to the Levites as an inheritance. That is why I've said to them, among the children of Israel, they have no inheritance. So just as back then, they were to focus on the word, on teaching the word, and causing the people to understand the word so that the people benefited. And so in the case of that priest, all the bad stuff stopped happening to the people, and the people did well. Okay, the same is true today. In 1 Corinthians 9, 1 to 6, Paul writes, am I not an apostle? Am I not free? Have I not seen Yeshua Messiah, our master? Are you not my work in the master? If to others I'm not an apostle. I certainly am to you. For you are the seal of the office of the apostle in the master. So he's writing specifically to the Corinthians. My defense to those who examine me is this: do we not have a right to eat and drink? Do we not have a right to take along a sister, a wife, as do also the other apostles and the brothers of the master and Kepha? Or do only Barnabas and I have no right to refrain from working? So this is the point. Just like the Levites would not work in the field, here the apostles, the people who teach the congregations, they do not do work so that they can do work in service of the tent of meeting. This is what happened, okay? Remember how many times they were told, do not forsake the Levite, do not forsake the Levite. In Nehemiah, when they were all coming back from Babylon and the temple was being reestablished, it says, I learned that the portions for the Levites had not been given to them, for each of the Levites and the singers who did the work had gone back to his field. That's not what they were supposed to be doing. Then I contended with the deputy rulers and said, why is the house of Elohim forsaken? And I gathered them together and set them in their place. So like I said, those things that they're warned about time and time again, keep the Sabbaths, keep them holy, don't forsake the Levite. All of those things, they're all the things that they fell into. And as they were warned against doing those things, so are we. 2 Chronicles 31, 4-6 says, and he said to the people, those who dwelt in Jerusalem, to give the portion for the priests and the Levites, so they were strengthened in the Torah of Yehovah. And as the word spread, the children of Israel brought large quantities of the first fruits of grain and wine and oil and honey and of the increase of the field, and they brought in the tithe of all they brought in abundantly. And the children of Israel and Yehudah, those who dwelt in the cities of Yehudah, brought the tithe of cattle and sheep, even the tithe of the holy, which they were set apart, which they'd set apart to Yehovah the Elohim, they brought in, and they gave heaps. The purpose of this is very simple. Okay, the Levites teach the people how to have good standing before Yehovah. Yehovah then blesses the people as he has promised to do. Then they give a ma'aseh of that to the Levites, who are strengthened by it, and the cycle continues. It's very simple. It's a beautiful thing. We're told in 1 Corinthians 12, verse 12, for as the body is one and has many members, but all the members of that body, being many, are one body. It works the same with us. We're one body. We don't think, I'm the hand who's doing all of the work. The mouth has not done any of this work. It's not how it works. We're all one body, and one part of the body provides for the other part of the body. 1 Corinthians 9 continues and says, who serves as a soldier at his own expense? Who plants a vineyard and does not eat its fruit? Or who shepherds a flock and does not feed on the milk of the flock? Do I say this as a man, or does the Torah say the same too? For it has been written in the Torah of Moshe, you shall not muzzle an ox while it treads out the grain. Is it about oxen Elohim is concerned? Or does he say it because of us all? For this was written because of us, that he who plows should plow in expectation, and the thresher in expectation of sharing. If we've sown spiritual seed among you, is it too much if we reap material goods from you? If others share authority over you, should not rather we? But we have not used this authority, but we put up with all, lest we hinder the good news of Messiah. So back then, it was the same. People did not like to hear this message. People didn't like to hear that they had to give to the poor. The Yehovah could command them what to do with what they had worked for. Do you not know that those serving the set-apart place eat from the set-apart place, and those attending the altar have their share of the offerings of the altar? That's the priests, as we talked about. So also Yehovah instituted that those announcing the good news should live from the good news. Okay? When did Yehovah institute that those sharing the good news should eat of the good news in Scripture? It's when he commanded the tithe, isn't it? That's the only point that we see in the Torah where he commands such. Okay, the good news was told to them as it was told to us. Those giving the good news should live from the good news. That's the tithe. That's the only thing that Paul can be referring to here. 2 Corinthians 9, 6-10 says, and I've seen this verse twisted, it says, this, he who sows sparingly shall also reap sparingly, and he who sows on blessing shall also reap on blessing. Let each one give as purposes in his heart, not of grief or of necessity, for Elohim loves a joyous giver. I've heard people who will take this verse and they'll say, we don't have to tithe. Have you not read that you're not to tithe of grief or necessity, but of a joyful heart? What they don't understand is that the actual implication of that is that it grieves them to do the commands of Yehovah, and that they really are grieved by having to give a tithe. And he says, doesn't he, if you love me, you shall keep my commandments. His commandments are him. So if we love him, we're not going to be grieved by these things. But I've heard people turn this verse around to mean exactly the opposite of what it does mean. If Elohim is able to make all favor overflow toward you, that you always, having all you need in every way, have plenty for every good work. What are good works in terms of Scripture? It's doing the commandments. Okay? Elohim's able to bless you abundantly. That promise which comes with all of the mincha. As it has been written, he scattered abroad, he gave to the poor, his righteousness remains forever, as we read before. He who supplies seed to the sower and bread for food shall supply and increase the seed you have sown and increase the fruit of your righteousness. You are never able to outgive Yehovah. All you need is that belief, to believe his word is true. And if that's the testing of your belief, please don't fail that testing of your belief. Don't say that his word is a lie, that it doesn't apply to you. Hebrews 4:12-13 tells us the word of Elohim is living, working sharper than any two-edged sword, cutting through even to the dividing of soul and spirit, and of joints and marrows, and able to judge the thoughts and intents of the heart. And there is no creature hidden from his sight, but all are naked and laid bare before the eyes of him with whom is our account. The word will judge where you are at. If you need to, make that a sham, that guilt offering. Confess that it is guilt before Yehovah. Don't hide. Don't conceal your transgressions even to yourself. Confess that you're guilty before Yehovah for that thing. Then make the chata'at, the sin offering, which is repentance, and turn. 1 Samuel 2:12-16. Okay, I include this verse because to me it seems obvious where this aversion to the idea of we use our material goods for what Yehovah wants us to use them for. And very simply, it's because men of Elohim, people who are supposed to be men of Elohim, have misused this right back in history. If we go right back to 1 Samuel, okay, right back to the sons of Eli, people were doing the same thing at the same time. The sons of Eli were sons of Belial. They were sons of worthlessness. They were worthless. They did not know Yehovah. And the ruling of the priests with the people was that when any man offered the sacrifice, the priest's servant shall come with a 3-pronged flesh hook in his hand while the meat was cooking. So the sons of Eli were priests, and this is what they were into. And shall thrust it into the basin or kettle or cauldron or pot, and the priest would take for himself all that the flesh hook brought up. Thus they did in Shiloh to all the Israelites who came there. So just like today, you've got people who will teach things and say this is from the word of Elohim in order to enrich themselves. You've got the Christian church who will do away with all of the Torah. The one thing that they'll tell you to do is to tithe, even though the tithe is to be given to those who teach and explain the Torah. Okay? You have people who are trying to enrich themselves based off a twisted version of what Yahovah says. And this is how the priests taught the people. They said, this is what is pleasing to Yahovah. Also, before they burn the fat, the priest servant would come and say to the man who sacrificed, give meat for roasting to the priest, for he does not accept cooked meat from you, but raw. So the Torah says to cook the meat before either party would eat of it. The priests, however, this isn't quite as much use to them, is it? They want the raw meat, what they can keep for longer. So they said, this is what Yahovah says. And if the man said to him, let the fat be burned up first, then take as much as your soul desires, he would then answer him, no, but give it to me now, and if not, I shall take it by strength. And the sin of the young men was very great before Yahovah, for the men despised the mincha of Yahovah. They lightly esteemed it. They took it as if it was something to enrich them, rather than the following of the commands of Yahovah. Philippians 4:16-19, Paul says, because even in Thessalonica, you sent to my need once and twice. Okay, he's not talking about ma'aseh here. He's talking about a mincha, them giving to his need. That would be a mincha if you were to give to somebody who is needy, as we saw in Deuteronomy 15. Not that I seek the gift, but I seek the fruit that is multiplying to your account. So this is the opposite mindset to the sons of Eli, who wanted, they wanted the meat raw, they wanted to take more of it than was due to them, whatever it was. Here Paul is saying, look, I'm not seeking a gift from you, I'm seeking the fruit that will come to you from you doing the commands. Indeed, I have all and more than enough. I have been filled, having received from Epaphroditus what you sent, a sweet-smelling fragrance, an acceptable offering, well-pleasing to Elohim. So Paul equates this again as an offering to Elohim. He equates it with the mincha. My Elohim shall fill all your need according to his riches in esteem by Messiah Yeshua. He says, this is why it is good for you to do this. Okay? Not that I want the gift from you. I want the fruit that comes from that Elohim looking out for you. I want that to multiply to your account. I want you to give that mincha. Deuteronomy 26:12-15 again speaks in terms of the blessing that comes from this. It says, when you have completed tithing, all the tithe of your increase in the third year, which is the year of tithing, and have given it to the Levite, to the stranger, the fatherless, and to the widow, which you will have done in that third year, and they have eaten within your gates and have been satisfied. Okay, so it was taken to Jerusalem, it was then distributed to the Levites, and then those people would take it back, and it's what they would subsist on for the rest of the year. Then you shall say before Yahovah your Elohim, I have put away the set-apart portion from my house, and also have given it to the Levite, to the stranger, to the fatherless, and to the widow, according to all your command, which you have commanded me. I have not transgressed your commands, nor have I forgotten. I have not eaten any of it when in mourning, nor have I removed it for any unclean use, nor given any of it for the dead. So it doesn't matter what situation arose. I didn't use it for anything else other than being set apart to you. I have obeyed the voice of Yahovah my Elohim. I have done according to all that you have commanded me. Look from your set apart dwelling place from the heavens. Bless your people Yisrael, the land which you have given us, as you swore to our fathers, a land flowing with milk and honey. So after you've done that, you're in the position then when you can look to Elohim and you can say, please bless me. You've promised in your word to bless me. But it's only when you've done that, you've not taken of it and said, oh, this 10% really, this is Yehovah's, but I'm going to use it for some kind of other thing. I'm going to use it for my own pleasure, or for this, or I think I need it for this or for that. You've not used it for any unclean use, then you ask Yehovah and he can bless you. Yehovah spoke to Moshe saying, speak to the Levites and say to them, when you take from the children of Israel the tithes which I have given from them as your inheritance, then you shall present a contribution, a terumah of it to Yehovah. Okay, so this is important. If you tithe to somebody, they are required by the Torah to tithe of your tithe. Your contribution shall be reckoned to you as grain from the threshing floor and as filling from the winepress. Thus you also present a contribution unto Yehovah from all your tithes, which you receive from the children of Israel, and you shall give from it the contribution to Yehovah and to Aharon the priest. So the way that we do it here, if we receive a tithe, we take a tithe of that tithe. We shouldn't really use the word tithe. It's not a real word, it's tenth. We take a tenth of that tenth and we give it to Aharon, who is Yeshua for us. So we give it to the least of the brethren. When we receive a tenth, we give a tenth, and we give that to the least of the brethren. Put this picture up to illustrate a point. Okay, this is more common than perhaps you would think. People confuse, or perhaps they feel more comfortable with the idea of they give something to a Levite for a specific purpose. Okay, or they give to a ministry. Say somebody buys a ministry a minibus. Okay, and then what they do is they call that their tithe. Maybe people feel more comfortable with being able to say what is done with their money, which they've given. Okay, and they call that a tithe. That's not a tithe. That is, however, a mincha. That is a voluntary offering to Yehovah. It is a terumah to Yehovah. It's something that you lift up to Yehovah. What it's not is a tithe. Just like giving to the poor, that is a mincha. What it's not is a tithe. 1 Samuel 15:17-26 says, Shemuel said, though you were little in your own eyes, were you not the head of the tribes of Israel? And did not Yehovah anoint you king over Israel? And Yehovah sent you on the way and said, go and you shall put under the ban the sinners, the Amalekites, fight against them until they're consumed. Why did you not obey the voice of Yehovah, but swoop down on the spoil and did evil in the eyes of Yehovah? Shaul said to Shemuel, I did obey the voice of Yehovah. I went on the way on which Yehovah sent me, brought back Agag, king of Amalek, and I put Amalek under the ban. But the people took of the spoil of the sheep and cattle, the best of that which should have been put under the ban, to sacrifice to Yehovah, your Elohim, in Gilgal. Okay, so I did obey. I didn't do exactly as I was told, but I did something better. We took the best of these things and we gave them to Yehovah instead of doing what he said to do with them. It's exactly the same mindset as one who would buy a minibus and say, look, I've spent well more than my tithe and I've given this to a ministry. It's the same mindset. I did obey. I am obeying. Not doing what you said, but I am obeying. I've redefined that. Then Shemuel said, does Yehovah delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices, as in obeying the voice of Yehovah? Look, to obey is better than an offering. To heed is better than the fat of rams. The whole purpose of all these things, in my estimation, the giving of offerings, it's all about our obedience. It's not about how many rams we give. It's about, do we give a ram when Yehovah has asked for a ram? The burnt offerings, Yehovah doesn't need any of that stuff. Yehovah doesn't need any money. What he needs is our obedience. Jeremiah 6:19-20, Hear, O earth, see, I am bringing evil upon this people, even the fruit of their thoughts, because they have not listened to my words, nor my Torah. They rejected it. What need have I of frankincense from Shavah and sweet cane from a distant land? Your burnt offerings are not acceptable. Your sacrifices have not been sweet to me. What need have I of your money? What need have I of anything that you wish to give to me, which is in distinction to what I've asked for? What I need from you is for you to be my people, to love me, to cherish my commands, and to obey me. That's all he asks for. Genesis 4:5-7. And he did not look to Cain and his mincha, and Cain was very wroth, and his face fell. So maybe we'll bring a mincha, but maybe Yehovah will not regard it. Yehovah said to Cain, why are you wroth? Why is your face fallen? If you do well, is there not acceptance? If you do not do well, sin is crouching at the door. Its desire is for you, but you should master it. So Cain's offering could have been 50 times bigger than Abel's offering, but it wasn't what Yehovah had asked for. He looked to Abel and to his offering because it was right. So we need to understand that we can bring a mincha to Yehovah that is not acceptable. Ecclesiastes 5:1 says, guard your steps when you go to the house of Elohim. Draw near to Shema rather than to give the sacrifice of fools. Listen, hearken, and obey to what he says. Be careful when you go up to the temple. Give what he's asked for. Don't give the sacrifice of fools, for they do not know that they do evil. Okay, it's something that is probably present in all of us, this thinking that we can give Yehovah something better than he's asked for. Surely Yehovah likes this. Surely this would be a big thing to give to Yehovah. That sort of thinking makes sense to us coming from a worldly perspective. Draw near rather to Shema, to hearken, to obey, rather than to give the sacrifice of fools. All a man's ways are right in his own eyes, but Yehovah weighs the hearts. To do righteousness and justice is more acceptable to Yehovah than a sacrifice. Hearken. And we imposed commands on ourselves to give from ourselves yearly 1/3 of a shekel for the service of the house of our Elohim, for the showbread, for the continual grain offering, the continual burnt offering. So when a burnt offering was given, a grain offering was given with it, of the Shabbats, of the Chodashim, for the appointed times, for the set-apart offerings, for the sin offerings to make atonement for Yisrael, for all the work of the house of our Elohim. So they gave these things which were for the service in the house of Elohim. Okay? What they didn't do at this point is say, well, we've given a load of stuff that we would usually give in our tithe, so we will give less of a tithe. We cast lots among the priests and the Levites for the people for bringing the wood offering into the house of our Elohim, according to our fathers' houses, at the appointed times, year by year, to burn on the altar of Yehovah our Elohim, as is written in the Torah, and to bring the first fruits of our soil, the first fruit of all trees, year by year to the house of Yehovah. Also to bring the firstborn of our sons, our livestock, as it is written in the Torah, the firstlings of our herds and our flocks, to the house of our Elohim, to the priests attending in the house of our Elohim, and that we should bring the first fruits of our dough and our terumah, and the fruit from all kinds of trees, of new wine and of oil. So all those extra things that they imposed on themselves to bring, everything that was brought to the priests, and the tithes of the land to the Levites. Okay, that's a separate thing. As I say, people are very easily minded to things that make sense to them. But we have to be careful. We need to draw near to Yehovah to obey what he says, not to bring a huge sacrifice, the sacrifice of fools. So, important things for us to understand about tithing. One's tithe is money that is due to Yehovah, not money that is due to any Levite, teacher, or ministry. Okay, as long as you're giving it to a Levite, you can give it to anyone. It's not due to the Levite. It was to be given to the Levites in lieu of it being given to Yehovah, though it's due to Yehovah. One's tithe is not any money given to a teacher or ministry. That is, however, a mincha. So any money that you give, you don't say, I'm giving a tithe. Okay, that's not the correct words to use. You're giving a mincha, giving an offering. Okay, tithes are separate. One's tithe is not money given to the needy. But that is, however, a mincha. All of these things are minchas. When we use material goods for Yehovah's purposes, that is a mincha. One's tithe is specifically 10% of one's increase. One's tithe is money taken before one spends of one's increase. Okay, so you are increased by something. A tithe is a 10% of your increase. You don't say, okay, well, I'll give a tithe, but after I've spent on this, after I've spent on that, after I've spent on the other. And you might think that sounds ridiculous, but I've had multiple people write emails to me to say, is it okay to give a tithe after I've spent on this project that I'm doing or that project? Because, you know, I'm not really increased by it, am I, if I've spent of the money that I got? That's not really being increased by it. One's tithe must be spent of to eat before Yehovah at the 3 feasts. Okay, so if you take your tithe to give him money, you are required to eat of and rejoice before Yehovah. You're required to do that by the Torah. In the 3rd year of tithing, one's tithe must not only be given to the Levite, but also to the orphan, stranger, and widow. And similarly, it's not only to be given to the orphan, stranger, and widow, but also to the Levite. And it's not the poor tithe. You'll hear people use this phrase. It's an incorrect phrase. It's just maybe an assumption. When you read about those groups of people, you think of them as the poor. And perhaps they were poor. They were certainly vulnerable. Malachi 3, 1-12 is something that we need to bear in mind. This is about the return of Yeshua and how he finds his people and how he sees his people when he returns. Okay, so quite possibly this is going to be something directly for us if Yeshua returns in our days. See, I am sending my messenger, and he shall prepare the way before me. Then suddenly the master you are seeking comes to his temple, even the messenger of the covenant in whom you delight. See, he is coming, said Yehovah. And who is able to bear the day of his coming? Who is able to stand when he appears? For he is like the fire of a refiner and the soap of a launderer. And he shall sit as a refiner and a cleanser of silver, and he shall cleanse the sons of Levi and refine them as gold and silver. And they shall belong to Yehovah, bringing near, synonymous word with karav, to draw near, and mincha, in righteousness. Okay, so Yeshua's going to return, and mincha, in righteousness, shall be brought. Then shall the mincha of Yehudah and Yerushalayim be pleasant to Yehovah, as in the days of old, as in former years, when Yeshua returns. And I shall draw near to you for judgment, and I shall be a swift witness against the practices of witchcraft, against adulterers, against them that swear to falsehood, against those who oppress the wage earner in his wages, the widows and the fatherless, and those who turn away as sojourner and do not fear me, said Yehovah Sabaoth. Okay, so within that we have examples of mincha being given. You turn away a sojourner, you don't give to the sojourner, and you say, oh, I wish that I could. And you've got 2 of something that you could give to them. Yehovah says, I will draw near to you for judgment. The word's mishpat, it's justice. Draw near to you for justice. For I am Yehovah, I shall not change, and you, O sons of Yaakov, shall not come to an end. So his standards are the same as they were in days of old, as they are now. From the days of your fathers you have turned aside from my laws and did not guard them. Turn back to me, and I shall turn back to you, said Yehovah Zebaot. But you said, in what shall we turn back? This is talking about the state of his people preceding his return and how he will deal with them when he does return. They say to him, what do we need to repent over? Would a man rob Elohim? Yet you are robbing me. But you said, then what if we robbed you in the tithe and in the offering? Okay, so again, this is directly talking about the people before he returns. Potentially it's talking about us as those direct people. It's certainly talking about the state of his people and their attitudes towards him before he returns, which does pertain to us. You have cursed me with a curse. You are robbing me, this nation, all of it. Bring all the tithes into the storehouse and let there be food in my house. Please prove me in this, said Yehovah Zebaot. Again, whether I do not open for you the windows of the heavens and shall pour out for you boundless blessing. And I shall rebuke the devourer for you so that it does not destroy the fruit of your ground, nor does the vine fail to bear fruit for you in the field, said Yehovah Zebaot. And all nations shall call you blessed, for you shall be a land of delight, said Yehovah Zebaot. So before he returns, his people are in a situation where they're not paying a tithe to him. Okay, that should be striking to us. And he says to those people, to us, you are robbing me. Okay, thankfully, I don't think this applies to the people who are here. People who are here have been taught on this previously. Okay, but this does apply to his people. And this is something you see it. If you're on Facebook in any Torah groups, or if you're online in any Torah groups, you'll see it over and over again, this teaching. The tithe does not apply for today. The tithe does not apply for today. It's the one part of the Torah keepers don't keep, where it's the one part of the Torah that the Christians do keep.